In museums, university archives, and climate-controlled storage rooms around the world, there are objects that don't belong. Not because they are forgeries, not because they are misidentified, but because they are real, authenticated, and completely impossible. They existed before the technologies needed to create them. They contain knowledge that their makers, by all official accounts, could not have possessed. Mainstream science has explanations for all of them. But as you'll see, those explanations don't always satisfy. These are 5 artifacts that quietly force us to ask the question most historians would rather avoid. What if history is missing a chapter? Every era of human history leaves behind a residue. Tools, pottery, coins, bones. Archaeology reads these like tree rings, layering time into something legible, but occasionally, something surfaces that doesn't fit the ring. Something too complex, too precise, too aware of things civilization wouldn't rediscover for another 1,000 years. These objects are called out-of-place artifacts, a clinical term for something deeply unsettling. The academic response is almost always the same: dismiss the fringe, reinforce the consensus. And sometimes, that's the right call. History is full of misidentified objects and sensationalized claims. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes, an object survives every attempt at dismissal. Those are the ones worth examining. In 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers sheltering from a storm near the island of Antikythera decided to dive a wreck they'd spotted before. They surfaced with bronze statues, glassware, coins, the standard cargo of a wealthy Roman vessel. But among the debris was a corroded, unremarkable lump of bronze. It was set aside, nearly thrown away. It wasn't until decades later that researchers began to understand what they had found. Inside the corrosion was a system of 37 interlocking bronze gears, precisely calibrated to track the movements of the sun, the moon, the 5 known planets, and the dates of the ancient Greek athletic calendar, including the Olympics. It could predict lunar eclipses up to 18 years in advance. By every modern measurement, it is an analog computer. A working mechanical model of the solar system was built approximately 2,100 years ago. Here's the problem. The next known device of comparable mechanical complexity doesn't appear in the historical record for another 14 centuries. This is not a fringe claim. This is the consensus. The Antikythera Mechanism has been X-rayed, 3D modeled, and partially reconstructed. Its sophistication is not disputed. What is disputed is the implication. If a single Greek craftsman, or workshop, could build this in 100 BCE, where are the other examples? Where are the less sophisticated predecessors? The failed prototypes? Gears like this don't emerge from nothing. They require generations of iterative knowledge. The shipwreck gave us the masterpiece. History never gave us the school. In 1938, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig was sorting through the basement storage of the National Museum of Iraq. He found a small, unremarkable clay jar. Inside it, a copper cylinder. Inside the cylinder, an iron rod, suspended in place and sealed with asphalt. Koenig recognized the configuration immediately. He had seen it in a modern chemistry laboratory. Fill that clay jar with an acidic liquid, grape juice, vinegar, lemon juice, and you have a working galvanic cell. A battery. The jar dates to the Parthian period, roughly 250 BCE to 224 CE. When replicas are filled with grape juice, they produce between 1 and 2 volts. The official response has been measured skepticism. Perhaps it stored sacred scrolls. Perhaps the internal components are coincidental. Perhaps Koenig was seeing patterns where none existed. But here is what the skeptics have not fully answered. If not a battery, what is it? Why the copper cylinder? Why the iron rod? Why the asphalt seal, which creates a watertight, airtight closure? And there is a detail that rarely makes it into the mainstream discussion. Koenig didn't find one of these jars. He found several, grouped together, with the same internal configuration. Whatever this was, someone was deliberately producing them repeatedly, with a consistent, precise design. That is not a coincidence. If these 2 objects have already given you that quiet, unsettled feeling, the sense that you are being told a partial story, stay with us. The next 3 go deeper. In 1929, historians examining the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul made an unexpected find. A map, dated 1513 and drawn on gazelle skin, signed by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. The map shows the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and the Americas with a precision that shouldn't have been possible in 1513. Columbus had reached the Caribbean just 17 years earlier. And yet the proportional accuracy is startling. But that wasn't what stopped researchers cold. At the bottom of the map, there is a coastline, a continuous landmass running along the southern edge. It matches, in its general contours, the Antarctic coast. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820. That is a gap of over 300 years. And here is the detail that makes this truly difficult to dismiss. The coastline depicted doesn't correspond to Antarctica as it appears today, buried under an ice sheet up to 4 kilometers thick. It corresponds to subglacial Antarctica, the coastline beneath the ice. We only mapped that coastline using 20th century seismic surveys. Piri Reis himself noted in his annotations that he compiled the map from older source charts. Some of them, he wrote, dated back to a considerable time before his time. If those source charts were accurate, if someone, at some point, charted Antarctica before the ice, then we are looking at evidence of a civilization capable of oceanic cartography at a level we do not recognize. Mainstream historians argue that the southern landmass is a distortion of South America. That is a reasonable argument. It is also incomplete, because the map shows South America and the southern coastline separately. In the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, there is a room that most tourists never enter. Deep in the crypts below the main sanctuary, the walls are covered in reliefs, standard enough for an Egyptian temple, until you look closely at one particular carving. It depicts what appears to be a large, elongated glass bulb. Inside the bulb, a serpent stretches from end to end, upright, in what appears to be a state of illumination. The bulb rests on a pillar that serves as an electrical insulator. A braided cable appears to connect the device's base to what looks like a box or terminal. In isolation, this could be purely symbolic. Egyptian art is rich with serpent imagery, but it doesn't stand in isolation. Electrical engineers examining the relief have noted that, if rendered as a physical object, its proportions align closely with those of a Crookes tube, an early vacuum tube used to study electrical discharge, invented in the 19th century. The official explanation is that it represents a lotus flower giving birth to a serpent, a documented Egyptian creation motif. That explanation is coherent. But it struggles with one thing. If you build a physical replica of the Dendera relief and flood it with inert gas, the serpent, the discharge, illuminates the tube. We cannot say this is a light bulb. The evidence does not permit that certainty. What we can say is that it appears to be one. And the craftsmen who made it were among the most precise, deliberate artists in human history. Every image they carved was carefully chosen. Every symbol carried meaning. So what did they believe they were showing us? In 1898, an Egyptian archaeologist excavating a tomb at Saqqara found a small wooden object, unmistakably shaped like a bird. It was catalogued, placed in a storage box, and forgotten in the Cairo Museum for 72 years. In 1969, Dr. Khalil Messiha, a physician and amateur archaeologist, was reviewing bird figurines from the collection when he noticed something unusual about one of them. It didn't have the typical horizontal tail feathers of a bird figurine. It had a vertical tail fin. The wings were flat, the body streamlined, the nose angled upward. When a model was built to its specifications and placed in a wind tunnel, it demonstrated stable glide characteristics. The wooden object, dated to approximately 200 BCE, has the aerodynamic profile of a monoplane glider. Egyptologists maintain it is a decorative votive object, a stylized bird, nothing more. And perhaps it is. But it was found in a tomb. Not a workshop, not a household. A tomb. A place where objects were placed with specific, deliberate, spiritual intention. What were they memorializing? 5 objects. 5 gaps in the record. None of them, individually, overturns history. Each has an official explanation, and each is not without merit. But here is what sits uneasily in the space between evidence and explanation. Every one of these artifacts appears without precedent. No prototypes, no evolutionary chain. No lesser versions in the archaeological record show how humanity arrived at them. They appeared, and in most cases, they disappeared, never replicated again in the ancient world. The Sumerian scribes who recorded their king list were not given to careless exaggeration. The Egyptian craftsmen who carved the Dendera crypts were among the most meticulous artists in history. When careful, methodical people leave behind objects we cannot explain, the responsible question isn't to explain them away, it's to sit with the discomfort and ask, what if we are not the first to know these things? And what if the evidence has been in front of us all along, waiting patiently in museums, desert crypts, and ocean floors for someone willing to look without flinching? These are not stories of magic or myth. They are stories of a human past that may be far older, far stranger, and far more capable than the history we were taught. The past is never as far away as it seems. If these forgotten histories resonate with you, subscribe. We are just getting started. And tell us in the comments, which of these 5 unsettles you the most? And what do you think it means?